Campaign 2018 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, Marshfield Clinic Health System, and Campaign 2018 partner Milwaukee Journal Sentinel.
John Imes of Madison is a Democratic candidate in the 77th Assembly District. John, welcome back to WisconsinEye.
Hi, Steve. Nice to see you again.
In one of your campaign videos,
Yep.
former Speaker Loftus says, let me quote, "John, the UW needs you."
Right.
Is that one of your top issues in your campaign, John?
It definitely is. I think Tom looked at my experiences. I think he looked at my experience. I have a responsible corporate background. I have a small business experience the last 20 years. Innovative nonprofit. I've been an elected official, a local elected official the last 6 years. So I think Tom looked at that and said, that's exactly what the university needs. We need someone that can defend the university and defend and call for greater funding for the University of Wisconsin.
Well, one of the funding issues, as you know, we're in the 6th year of a resident undergraduate tuition.
That's right.
Should that freeze continue into a 7th and 8th year?
I think the freeze is fine. I think it's a question of budget priorities. As you know, the university used to be 30, 35, even 40% of the, or I should say the state budget, the state's contribution to the university.
State support for the system.
Yeah, now it's in the low teens. So that's got to turn around. So where are the obvious opportunities to get that revenue? I look at that agricultural and manufacturing tax credit, which started out relatively small, and I think it's going to be close to $400 million a year. Over $100 million of that tax credit is going to 381 filers that are making over $2.8 million a year.
Each.
Yeah. Each. Yeah, and that's before the Trump, the tax plan, which a lot of high earners benefited from. So I think there's an opportunity there. I think there's another $100 million between $250,000 and that $2 million threshold.
Okay.
So how can that be better allocated? When I talk to business leaders, what's their number one concern? It's they can't find enough skilled workers, and they can't get people to their places of employment. So that tells me that we need to build capacity within our technical college system. We need to build capacity within our undergraduate and graduate system. We need to build capacity within our secondary schools, so we're getting more folks to stay here.
So you would have taken you would take the $400 million from that new manufacturing credit,
or a significant portion of it. I mean, some of it's benefiting smaller farms.
Yeah.
And so maybe anything above that $250,000 per year threshold, maybe we need to retool that. I mean, we're not tying jobs to that, so that was one of the big arguments. And then there's the whole issue of transportation. We can't get people to their places of employment. The state has basically said no to RTAs. Well, there's 3 parts in the state where RTAs would really work. I'll tell you, Racine and Kenosha is going to be begging for an RTA when you look at the development of the Foxconn and then all the supporting entities associated with it, related developments and what have you.
Yep.
We should be running bus rapid transit from Milwaukee so that we can get workers from low-income households to take advantage of those jobs.
Okay.
There's low-income workers in Racine and Kenosha that could take advantage. And even in Dane County, I think it's almost 10% of young people don't have a driver's license. This is a different era, and we're spending all of our money on these mega projects in southeast Wisconsin. What was it, $800 million to build the Marquette? Now it's 2-3 times that we're spending on the zoo. And traffic counts really aren't up much. People aren't driving as much. We need to make sure that our transportation is aligned accordingly. So
you mentioned RTAs. Do we need to raise either the gas tax, the registration fee, or toll?
No, I think we need to. As you know, we did some pretty shoddy accounting. I mean, the DOA report
underestimated the cost.
Yeah, it was like $3 billion. We weren't taking account for inflation and some other things, and it was just kind of hushed over. So we have to be better managers. So that's one. 2, I think we need to fix or repair what we have. I think that's really important. 3, the RTAs can be accomplished with a half-cent sales tax increment in those jurisdictions, and locals should have the opportunity to put that increment in place so that you can fund transit projects.
And what about tolling?
I think if we focus on fixing and repair what we have, I think giving more autonomy to local jurisdictions and fixing some local roads, pulling back a little bit from the mega projects. I just drove my daughter from Madison to Louisville, Kentucky for a volleyball tournament. The worst roads by far were between here and the Illinois line. and in northern Indiana. I mean, god-awful roads. At least northern Indiana had about 355 wind turbines, which, as you know, the state has basically said no to clean energy and clean energy investments and policies. Right. So, we need to fix and repair what we have, make expansions where they make sense, but be smarter about allocating those transportation dollars more widely.
I know you've been very active in clean energy. I think that's part of your business, isn't it? Or no?
It is. Well, the nonprofit, definitely. I mean, I've definitely been an advocate. What I've been saying, Steve, for a while is the other states around us are eating our lunch when it comes to clean energy policies, investment, and technologies. And, Wisconsin and Iowa were about the same place 10, 12 years ago, about 2% of our energy from wind. Mm-hmm. Iowa made the investments. They set some really big goals. 35% of all the electricity produced in Iowa is coming from wind.
Wind now.
Yeah, but what's the knock then on renewable energy? It's going to be more expensive. Electricity rates in Iowa are 30% less than Wisconsin. It's a competitive issue. Not to mention, we were the tool and die capital of the world for 100 years. There's 8,000 parts to a wind turbine. We should be making those turbines here. We have a fiberglass molding capability that we use for boats in the northeast part of the state. That could be retooled for wind turbine blades. We have deep water ports. We have access to markets. But we basically said to the clean energy industry, go away. Take your investment, take your jobs. The number one entry job right now, nationwide, is wind technician. They're coming out of certificate programs, associate degree programs. They're making $50,000, $60,000 a year. And 25% of renewable energy jobs are held by women. Another almost 25% are held by people of color. This is a growth opportunity, an opportunity for Wisconsin that's consistent with our heritage that we've really turned our backs on.
As you know, governors and legislators have not set a new renewable energy standard for Wisconsin. What should it be?
I don't know.
We've achieved the old 15%, haven't we?
Yeah, no, it was actually 10%.
10%. Thank you for the correction.
Yeah, we were one of the first ones early on. My whole thing is we should have a green and growing strategy in this state. So any growth in our economy, whether it's 1% a year, 2%, 3%, should be replaced with clean electrons. That's solar, that's wind, that's biofuels, that's whatever technology is available. It could be offshore wind, and I think that isn't tapped yet, certainly in Wisconsin. And we've got some tie-ins to infrastructure there. I think that would work. And then let's make sure that everyone's doing their part. 2% energy efficiency improvement every year. We don't need new coal plants. And over time, we'll be able to retool or make more efficient the existing stationary plants that we have. So our job growth continues, our economic growth continues, yet our emissions, including our emissions and contributions to climate change, they drop like a stone.
Okay. We've got a bunch of issues to go through.
Yep.
Levy limits. You now serve on the Shorewood board.
Yep.
Levy limits have been around since 2006.
Yep.
Are levy limits hurting the ability of local governments to provide?
Absolutely.
Should they be loosened or repealed?
Well, I'll tell you, first thing we should do is, Shorewood, we've done a great job kind of managing. We're one of only 4 municipalities in the state that have a AAA credit rating. As Personnel Committee Chair, I got 20% in increases through for our workers in 5 years after Act 10. Because we take care of our own. So I'll just say that. The people in the trenches, they're the problem solvers. They're the ones providing the services for public services for our residents. And we just got to take care of. We just have to take care of our own. Now, should there be some relaxation of those limits on no growth communities or very, very slow growth communities?
Where new construction is very
That's right.
anemic.
What's really helped Shorewood is we were the fastest growing municipality in the state 2 out of the last 5 years.
That'll give you a lot of new construction on which to levy.
That's right. And whereas the no growth folks, they can't pay their workers well. They're running into other difficulties. They can't provide the services that the residents provide. Okay. So that's one of the first things we have to do. The second thing we have to do is we got to get rid of the dark store loophole.
Okay.
We need legislation on that. There's no reason why these big box stores should be treated as vacant shells for purposes of property tax assessment.
Okay, let's talk about healthcare. Let's talk about healthcare in rural areas where you have older demographic, household income not up to the state standard, young people leaving, and more government, or more Medicaid and Medicare paying for more health care. How can we maintain, maybe even improve rural health care?
Well, I'll tell you, we should take the Medicaid dollars. That's one.
Okay.
2, and you mentioned young people leaving. I think broadband is a big part of this. So much of medicine these days is being done with bits and bytes. And as you know, we're we're behind the times when it comes to broadband applications. There's newer technologies like the white space technology that doesn't require fiber, doesn't require wires, that can provide pretty good broadband in some of our rural areas. That should be looked at and should be maximized. You know, this administration, this Republican majority turned its back on federal broadband money, 8 years ago, and has been playing catch up ever since. If the kids can't do their homework at home because the broadband, the bytes and the speeds just aren't there, that's a problem. If entrepreneurs can't start their businesses on our main streets in some of our rural areas, that's a problem. So I think if we could expand broadband, that's going to allow us to tap into higher quality care, better evaluations, and better care for our seniors.
Does the state have a role in helping to recruit and retain physicians, nurses, and other healthcare workers?
They do, and this relates to something I say at the door quite a bit, which is our young people today and our young talent today, they want to work in companies that have a soul, and they want to live in a state that has a soul. And we've been kind of soulless the last 8 years. Not to mention their parents and their grandparents want them to live in a soul. They want them to stay. They don't want to have them look to the Twin Cities or the West Coast or to the South for job opportunities. And we need to think about paying a fair wage. We need to think about providing kind of a high road strategy, family flexible benefits, educational and training opportunities, more of a work-life balance. That's what young people are looking for today, and I think that applies to medical professionals.
Our state aid for our K-12 public schools, this budget increases it. Yeah. Does it increase it enough?
No, I think we still have some catch-up to do. The special education funding has been basically frozen since 2010, 2011. So I think there's an opportunity there. The other thing we're not doing is we're not funding some of the support services in our schools, the social workers, the counselors. And to a certain extent, that relates to academic achievement. If you've got troubled youth, that just maybe aren't doing well, we need that support structure to be able to, do the peer-to-peer exchange and get them to a point where they're being more successful in our schools.
What about the voucher and choice program? It's grown from Madison. Grown from Milwaukee to Racine statewide. Your position?
I think it needs to be curtailed. It should be ended.
Okay.
The outcomes there aren't any different from our public schools. It's actually draining money from our public schools, and it should be ended.
A big item in the next budget will be whether we need a new state prison.
Yep.
Waupun and Green Bay are built in the 1800s.
Yep.
We're closing the 2 juvenile prisons. Do we need one?
I think we should close Lincoln Hills. Certainly, we don't need a $350 million prison. I think we need to look at restorative justice. I think we need to look at the amount of people that we're incarcerating for minor drug offenses. We're not talking about violent individuals here. We're talking about minor drug offenses. Or there's a little wrinkle in their parole or whatever it is. It's a minor infraction. Boom, they're thrown right back in the prison. I think we have to look at that in terms of the overall prison reform.
Had you been in the assembly, would you have voted for the Foxconn tax breaks?
We need a governor that can watch the till. If we're going to be writing checks for $150 to $200 million for the next 5 or 7 years, that was irresponsible. And I said as much. And I was someone early on that said we need to take the high road with Foxconn. The state does, and Foxconn does. But that's irresponsible. I would have pushed those payments out at least another 5 to 7 years to make sure that the payments were closer to the expected benefits. Mm-hmm. If we have any slowdown in the economy at all, they get paid first. So what do we take it from? The university system, from schools, from Medicaid, from infrastructure. We're already not keeping up on our roads. Our bonding is already at 20%. What do we take it from? So I thought that was irresponsible. We need someone that can watch the till.
Your position on both medical marijuana and legalizing recreational marijuana?
Yes, and let's tax it and let's regulate it.
Next steps to fight the epidemic with opioid, methamphetamine, heroin abuse?
I think they're related. I think you fully implement the HOPE agenda, the legislative package that was passed, and see if there's opportunities to improve on that. Medical marijuana may be a good substitute. You don't have the addictive qualities associated with that. And I think we also have to keep the pressure on the pharmaceutical companies for them to step up and be part of what's been just a horrendous development with their product.
Finally, it's an open seat, four-way primary, August 14th.
Yeah.
Want to talk about differences with you and your primary opponents?
Yeah, I'm doing the doors. I was the last one to get in. I got in 3 weeks before the deadline. You need 200 signatures. I got 460, which means I did 1,200 doors in 3 weeks. I think the next rep has got to meet people at the doors. Fighting Bob LaFollette said we need to have open primaries because the voters deserve a say. So we're going to give them that opportunity. I think we've got 4 really, really good folks that are running, and I look forward to the forums and the follow-up moving forward.
Good, thank you. John Imes of Madison is a Democratic candidate in the 77th Assembly District. The primary is August 14th. John, thank you for
Great to see you,
visiting
Steve.
with us.
Thanks again. All right.